It all started with one drunken night at a karaoke bar. My friend passed out, leaving me alone with his girlfriend, and the boundaries between right and wrong started to blur. What happened next was supposed to stay a secret, but some moments refuse to be forgotten. You just need to subscribe and like to hear different stories every day. Ethan Lee leaned back against the plush sofa, feeling the warmth of the room settle over him like a heavy blanket. Across the dimly lit space, the hum of soft music filled the air, blending with the faint scent of perfume and lingering wine. Emily Wu, Ryan's girlfriend, sat beside him, her shoulder brushing his with an ease that suggested she wasn't thinking too hard about it, or maybe she was. Ethan had noticed the way her gaze lingered a second too long during dinner, the way she leaned in just slightly when she spoke to him, as if testing the waters. Now, with Ryan passed out on the sofa, snoring softly, it felt like they were alone in their own little world. The flickering colored lights from the karaoke machine reflected in Emily's dark eyes, and Ethan could see the hint of something, their curiosity, maybe even temptation. He shifted slightly, and their legs touched. Emily didn't move away. If anything, she leaned in closer, her thigh pressing against his. A soft smile played at the corner of her lips, and Ethan felt a thrill run through him, subtle but undeniable. "You know," he said quietly, "you're a lot more fun when Ryan isn't around." Emily laughed, a soft, breathy sound that sent a shiver down Ethan's spine. "He'd hate to hear you say that," she whispered, her gaze flicking toward Ryan's sleeping figure before returning to Ethan. The playful tension between them was palpable, like the charged air before a storm. Ethan ran a hand along the back of the sofa, his fingers lightly brushing Emily's shoulder as if by accident. She didn't pull away. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, her hair falling in soft waves over her shoulder, inviting his touch without saying a word. "You're really bold tonight," Emily murmured, her voice low and teasing. "Am I?" Ethan asked, his hand sliding down her arm in a slow, deliberate caress. The softness of her skin sent another wave of heat through him. Emily's breath hitched, just barely, but enough for Ethan to notice. She shifted closer, her body brushing against his in a way that felt too intentional to be innocent. Her hand rested lightly on his knee, her fingers tracing slow circles through the fabric of his jeans. Ethan's pulse quickened. He knew this was dangerous, knew exactly where this was heading if neither of them stopped. But stopping was the last thing on his mind. "You're trouble," Emily whispered, her lips dangerously close to his ear. Ethan smiled, his hand drifting to her lower back, fingers pressing gently against the curve of her spine. Emily let out a soft sigh, her body relaxing against his, as if she had been waiting for this all along. For a moment, they stayed like that, locked in a delicate balance, neither of them quite ready to take the final step, but neither willing to let go. The warmth of her body seeped into his, and Ethan felt the room tilt slightly, as if the world outside had faded away, leaving only the two of them behind. "You shouldn't," Emily whispered, though her voice lacked conviction. "And yet," Ethan murmured, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face, his thumb grazing her cheek in a gesture that felt far more intimate than it should have. Emily's eyes fluttered shut for a brief moment, and when she opened them again, there was no hesitation left. She leaned in, her lips brushing against his, soft, tentative, and full of unspoken promises. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest as he closed the distance between them, capturing her mouth in a kiss that was slow and deliberate, savoring every second. Emily melted into him, her hands sliding up his chest, her fingers curling into the fabric of his shirt. Ethan's hand slipped under the hem of her top, his palm resting against the warm skin of her waist. She shivered under his touch, a soft sound escaping her lips that sent a surge of heat through him. The kiss deepened, their breaths mingling as they lost themselves in the moment. Emily's body pressed closer, her thigh sliding between his legs, the movement subtle but electric. Ethan's hand traveled up her back, tracing the curve of her spine as he pulled her tighter against him. "Ryan," Emily whispered against his lips, but the sound was barely more than a breath, lost in the heat of the moment. "He's not going to wake up," Ethan murmured, his lips brushing against the corner of her mouth. Emily let out a soft laugh, the sound tinged with excitement and something dangerously close to relief. Her fingers curled tighter in his shirt, as if holding onto him was the only thing keeping her grounded. For a moment, they hovered on the edge, teetering between what was right and what felt inevitable. Ethan's hand drifted lower, tracing slow, lazy circles against the small of her back, and Emily sighed, a sound full of surrender. "You're impossible," she whispered, her forehead resting against his. "And you love it," Ethan replied, his voice low and full of quiet confidence. Emily didn't deny it. Instead, she closed the distance between them once more, her lips finding his in a kiss that tasted of wine, regret, and something far sweeter, something neither of them could name but both were unwilling to let go of. Emily's breathing grew unsteady, and Ethan felt the warmth of her body settle against his. Her hand remained on his chest, her fingers tracing delicate lines along the fabric of his shirt, each touch sending a spark through him. In the dim light, the space between them felt non-existent, their bodies drawn together as if by an unspoken force they couldn't resist. Emily shifted slightly, her thigh brushing against his leg in a way that made Ethan's breath catch. She gave him a small, teasing smile, as if testing how far they could push this moment before it tipped into something more dangerous. "You know this is crazy, right?" she whispered, though she didn't move away. Her words carried the weight of hesitation, but her actions told a different story. Ethan smiled, a slow, deliberate grin. "Maybe," he whispered, his hand sliding along her waist, feeling the smoothness of her skin just beneath the edge of her shirt. "But it doesn't feel crazy, does it?" Emily let out a soft laugh, the sound low and intoxicating. "No, it doesn't." Their eyes locked, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. The room around them, the snoring from the couch, the faint hum of music faded into the background, leaving only the two of them suspended in this stolen moment. Ethan's fingers traced lazy circles along her lower back, each touch drawing her closer, until there was no space left between them. Emily's lips parted slightly, and Ethan felt the pull toward her deepen, as natural and inevitable as gravity. He leaned in, brushing his nose against hers, waiting for her to close the final distance. She hesitated for a heartbeat, then tilted her head, her mouth finding his in a kiss that was soft and searching. The kiss started slow, tentative, as if both of them were testing the waters. But the moment their lips touched, the tension between them snapped, giving way to something deeper, something they had both been holding back for too long. Emily pressed closer, her body molding against his as the kiss deepened, becoming more urgent with each passing second. Ethan's hand slid up her back, his fingers tracing the curve of her spine as he pulled her tighter against him. Emily responded with a soft sigh, her hands sliding up his chest, fingers curling into his shirt as if she needed to hold on to something solid. The taste of her sweet and laced with the remnants of wine sent a rush of heat through him, clouding his thoughts and drowning out any lingering sense of caution. Emily broke the kiss first, her forehead resting against his as she tried to catch her breath. Her cheeks were flushed, her lips slightly swollen from the intensity of the kiss. "This is really dangerous," she whispered, her voice unsteady. Ethan's hand remained on her back, his thumb brushing small, soothing circles against her skin. "I know," he murmured, his voice low and steady, "but I don't want to stop." Emily let out a shaky breath, her gaze flickering toward Ryan's still sleeping figure on the couch. For a moment, guilt flickered in her eyes, but it was quickly replaced by something far more dangerous: desire. "Neither do I," she whispered, almost as if the words had escaped her without permission. Ethan smiled, his hand drifting down her back, tracing the curve of her waist. Emily leaned into his touch, her body melting against his as if surrendering to the inevitability of the moment. He could feel her heartbeat against his chest, fast and unsteady, matching the rhythm of his own. Emily's hand slid lower, resting on his hips, and the subtle shift in her posture made Ethan's breath hitch. The warmth of her touch, the softness of her body against his, it was almost too much to bear. He knew they were playing with fire, knew the consequences if they got caught, but the thought of stopping now felt impossible. "You're dangerous," Ethan whispered, his lips brushing against the curve of her neck. Emily let out a soft laugh, the sound tinged with excitement and something that felt dangerously close to relief. "So are you," she murmured, tilting her head to give him better access. Ethan pressed a soft kiss to her neck, feeling her shiver beneath his touch. Her hands tightened on his hips, drawing him closer, and Ethan knew in that moment that they had crossed a line, one they could never uncross. The room felt smaller, the air heavier with the weight of what was happening between them. They were no longer teetering on the edge, they had already fallen, and there was no going back. Ethan's hand slipped beneath her shirt again, his palm skimming along the warm skin of her back. Emily's breath hitched, her body arching into his touch as if craving more. For a moment, they stayed like that, caught in the electric current of shared desire. The world outside the dimly lit room didn't exist, only the two of them, tangled together in a moment that was both reckless and perfect. Ethan's fingers grazed the small of Emily's back, lingering just beneath the hem of her shirt. The warmth of her skin against his palm sent a shiver through him, making it harder to remember where the boundaries once were. Emily's breath was soft and shallow, her chest rising and falling against his as they stayed locked in that delicate moment, teetering on the edge of something neither could take back. Her hand slipped down to his thigh, her touch light but deliberate. She shifted slightly, closing the last bit of space between them until her body was pressed fully against his. Ethan could feel the rapid beat of her heart through the thin fabric of her clothes, matching the wild thrum of his own pulse. Emily's gaze flickered to Ryan for the briefest moment, a fleeting glance at the man asleep just feet away. But when she turned back to Ethan, her eyes were dark with unspoken promises, the weight of desire overriding any hint of guilt. "He's not going to wake up," Ethan whispered, more to reassure her than anything else. Emily gave a small, breathless laugh, her lips dangerously close to his ear. "You'd better hope not," she teased, her voice a low murmur that sent a pulse of heat through him. Ethan's hand moved slowly, tracing the curve of her spine as he pulled her closer. The way she responded, her body soft and yielding against his, felt like permission. His other hand drifted to her hip, fingers pressing gently as if to test how far she would let him go. Emily exhaled a shaky breath, but didn't move away. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, her lips brushing his jaw in a touch so light it made him ache for more. Ethan turned toward her, catching her mouth in another kiss, this one deeper, more urgent, as if they were trying to steal as much as they could from the moment before it slipped away. Her hand slid under his shirt, her fingers warm against his skin as they explored his chest in slow, teasing strokes. Every touch sent sparks through Ethan, making it harder to think, harder to care about anything beyond the feel of her in his arms. The kiss grew bolder, more reckless. Emily shifted in his lap, her movements deliberate as her thigh slid between his legs. Ethan groaned softly, the sound muffled against her lips, and she smiled, an intoxicating mix of mischief and desire. "You're enjoying this too much," she whispered, her breath hot against his mouth. "And you're not?" Ethan murmured, trailing his fingers along the curve of her hip. Emily's response was a playful hum, her hands still roaming his chest, mapping every inch of skin she could reach. The way she touched him, like she was savoring every second, made Ethan forget about everything else. His hand slid higher, grazing the edge of her bra, and Emily shivered beneath his touch. She pressed closer, her breath hitching as his fingers traced slow circles along her back. Ethan knew they were far past the point of no return, but stopping now felt impossible. Emily kissed him again, her lips, soft but insistent, as if trying to drown out whatever lingering doubts remained. Ethan responded in kind, his hands tightening on her waist as he pulled her even closer. The heat between them was undeniable, an electric current that buzzed just beneath the surface, making every touch, every kiss feel like a spark waiting to ignite. Time seemed to blur, the boundaries between what they should do and what they wanted to do fading into nothing. Ethan's hands wandered freely now, exploring the dips and curves of her body as if committing them to memory. Emily's soft sighs and quiet gasps only encouraged him, pulling him deeper into the moment, making it harder to stop even if he wanted to. Her hands slid up to his shoulders, gripping tightly as she shifted again, her body aligning perfectly with his. Ethan's breath hitched, the feel of her so close making it difficult to think, to breathe. But he didn't care. All that mattered was this, their bodies tangled together, the world outside forgotten. Emily pulled back slightly, just enough to rest her forehead against his. Her breath came in short, shallow bursts, her cheeks flushed with a mix of excitement and uncertainty. "We're really doing this," she whispered, as if saying it aloud made it feel more real. Ethan smiled, brushing his thumb along the edge of her jaw. "Yeah," he murmured, "we are." And with that, the last of their restraint crumbled. Emily leaned in again, capturing his mouth in a kiss that felt like surrender, and Ethan knew there was no going back. Ethan's heart raced as the distance between them disappeared completely. Emily's breath was hot against his skin, her fingers tracing slow patterns along his shoulders. The dim room felt heavier now, charged with unspoken tension. Each glance, each touch, carried them further into a place where consequences no longer seemed to matter. Emily shifted on his lap, her body fitting perfectly against his, as if she had been meant to be there all along. Ethan's hands traveled along her back, his fingertips exploring the curve of her waist, feeling the way her body responded to every movement. She tilted her head slightly, her lips brushing the side of his neck, the softness of the kiss sending a shiver down his spine. "You're playing with fire," Emily whispered, though her words held no intention of stopping. Her voice was low, almost teasing, but it carried a weight that made Ethan's pulse quicken. "And you're not?" he murmured, his lips hovering just above hers. Emily smiled, the kind of smile that felt like a dare. "Maybe I like the heat." Ethan's hands slid lower, settling on her hips as she pressed closer, her movements slow and deliberate. The thin fabric of her clothes did little to hide the warmth of her body, and Ethan felt himself getting lost in the moment, the lines between right and wrong blurring with each breath. Her fingers tangled in his hair, pulling him closer as their lips met again, the kiss deeper this time, filled with an urgency neither of them could contain. Emily moved against him, her body soft and yielding, and Ethan groaned softly, the sound escaping before he could stop it. She pulled back slightly, just enough to look into his eyes. The flicker of guilt that had danced in her gaze earlier was gone, replaced by something far more dangerous: desire, unfiltered and undeniable. "He won't know," she whispered, her voice low and breathless, more reassurance to herself than anything else. Ethan smiled, his hands tightening on her waist. "No, he won't." Emily laughed quietly, a sound that felt almost like relief. She leaned in again, her lips grazing his ear as she whispered, "Then don't stop." That was all Ethan needed. His hands roamed freely now, exploring the curves of her body with a confidence that came from knowing she wouldn't push him away. Every touch, every kiss, drew them deeper into a moment they couldn't escape from. Emily's breath hitched as Ethan's fingers slipped beneath her shirt, his palms skimming along the bare skin of her back. She arched into his touch, her body molding perfectly against his, as if she had been waiting for this all along. Her hands slid down his chest, fingers tracing the lines of muscle beneath his shirt. The feel of her touch, the warmth of her breath against his neck, it was almost too much to bear, yet not nearly enough. Ethan kissed her again, slower this time, savoring the taste of her lips and the way her body responded to his every move. Emily let out a soft sigh, her hands tightening on his shoulders as if she needed something to hold on to. The air between them buzzed with tension, each moment heavier than the last, each touch more deliberate. Ethan knew they were crossing a line they couldn't uncross, but he couldn't bring himself to care. Not when she felt like this in his arms. Not when every kiss, every brush of skin, made the world outside disappear. "You're impossible," Emily whispered, her voice low and filled with a mix of frustration and longing. "And you love it," Ethan replied, his lips brushing against her jaw. Emily laughed softly, the sound warm and intimate. "Yeah," she whispered, "I do." Her confession hung in the air between them, a quiet admission that carried more weight than either of them was ready to acknowledge. But there was no time for regrets, no space for second thoughts. Not now. Ethan pulled her closer, his hands sliding down her back, savoring the feel of her beneath his fingertips. Emily responded with a soft moan, her head tilting back as Ethan kissed the curve of her neck, trailing slow, deliberate kisses along her skin. The world outside the dim room ceased to exist. There was only this moment, the heat of their bodies, the quiet hum of music in the background, and the unspoken promise of what was to come. The room felt heavy with the unspoken weight of what had just passed between them. Emily rested her head against Ethan's shoulder, her fingers lightly tracing along his arm. Their breaths were shallow and uneven, the tension lingering in the air like smoke after a fire. They both knew they had crossed a line, one that could never be uncrossed. Yet, neither of them seemed ready to let go of the moment. Ethan brushed his hand along Emily's back, feeling the warmth of her body through the thin fabric of her shirt. She didn't pull away. Instead, she melted deeper into his embrace, her body fitting against his like it belonged there. He pressed a kiss to her temple, lingering just long enough to savor the softness of her skin. "We should stop," Emily whispered, though her voice held no conviction. Ethan let out a soft laugh, the sound low and intimate. "Do you really want to?" Emily hesitated, her gaze flickering toward Ryan, who was still sound asleep on the sofa. For a moment, guilt flickered in her eyes, but it was quickly overtaken by something stronger, something far more dangerous. "You have read so much. Don't forget to subscribe and like." "No," she admitted, her voice barely audible. Ethan smiled, a slow, knowing grin, and gently ran his fingers along the curve of her waist. Emily shivered under his touch, her breath catching in her throat as if she were savoring every second. "Then let's stay here," Ethan whispered. Emily laughed quietly, the sound laced with a mix of amusement and surrender. She leaned in, pressing her lips against his in a kiss that felt softer this time, more deliberate, less urgent. It was the kind of kiss that promised more than just the moment, the kind that lingered even after it ended. For a while, they stayed like that, lost in each other, the world outside, fading into irrelevance. Ethan's hands traced lazy circles along her back, and Emily sighed softly, her body relaxing against his. The weight of the night pressed down on them, heavy but strangely comforting, as if they had found something neither of them had realized they needed. Eventually, Emily pulled back, her forehead resting against Ethan's. "We can't do this again," she whispered, though the words lacked conviction. "I know," Ethan murmured, his hands still resting on her hips. But the way she looked at him, the way her fingers lingered against his skin, told a different story. They both knew this wasn't over. Not really. Some things, once set in motion, have a way of continuing whether you want them to or not. Emily sat up slowly, adjusting her clothes, as if putting on a mask to face the real world again. Ethan watched her, admiring the way she carried herself with quiet grace, even in the aftermath of something so reckless. "We should go," she said softly, glancing at Ryan one last time. Ethan nodded, though part of him wanted to stay in this moment just a little longer. But he knew better. The night was over, and there was no use pretending otherwise. They slipped out of the room quietly, leaving Ryan behind, still lost in his drunken slumber. The cool night air hit them as they stepped outside, and for a moment, they stood in silence, the weight of what had happened between them hanging heavy in the space between them. "I'll get a cab," Ethan offered, his voice quiet but steady. Emily gave him a small, grateful smile, the kind of smile that carried 1,000 unspoken words. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice soft and sincere. The cab arrived, and Ethan opened the door for her. She hesitated for a second, then leaned in and pressed a lingering kiss to his cheek, just long enough to leave an impression, but not enough to say everything she wanted to. "Good night, Ethan," she whispered, her breath warm against his skin. "Good night, Emily," he replied, watching as she slipped into the cab and closed the door behind her. The car pulled away, its taillights disappearing into the darkness, leaving Ethan standing alone on the quiet street. The night felt colder now, the weight of what they had done settling over him like a heavy coat. Ryan would never know, and Emily and Ethan would carry this night with them tucked away in the corners of their memories, hidden but never truly forgotten. Some things, after all, have a way of lingering, no matter how much you try to leave them behind. Ethan slipped his hands into his pockets and turned toward the apartment. The world around him felt different, now tilted, as if he had stepped into a new version of himself, one that couldn't be undone. And maybe, he thought, as he walked through the quiet night, that wasn't such a bad thing after all.